Her wounded body trembled on the cold ground, and fear was frozen in her eyes. No one came near, no one heard her, until one hand reached out to her. What happened next changed everything. A frosty night. The gray snow, mixed with dirt, covered the abandoned road like a blanket of despair. The cold wind howled between the bare trees, as if the world itself were crying in grief. Luna, a German shepherd, a lonely shadow in this frozen chaos, limped along, her wounded paws leaving bloody marks in the snow. Her breath was heavy, breaking in the freezing air, and each step sent pain coursing through her frozen body. Luna remembered nothing of love or care. Her life had always been a battle for survival. She only knew cruelty, rough hands, yelling, and the chain that bound her freedom. Her owner wasn't a kind man. He treated her like a tool, not a living being. Every day was filled with fear. His anger flared without warning, and Luna would hide, cowering in a corner, praying his footsteps wouldn't come her way. When she was abandoned at the edge of the woods, she didn't cry or whimper. Luna simply watched as the car drove away, disappearing beyond the horizon. That moment wasn't liberation. It was a strange mixture of relief and confusion. She didn't know what would come next, but she understood that life on the streets, no matter how harsh, would still be better than the cage she had spent her days in. Since then, Luna wandered, guided only by instinct. Her thin, weakened body craved food, but finding it was nearly impossible. She tried approaching people, but every time they drove her away, sometimes with shouts, sometimes with stones. The pain from their blows felt familiar. After all, the world had always been cruel to her. One day she stumbled upon a landfill, hoping to find scraps of food. But other dogs, just as desperate as she was, wouldn't let her near. Luna crawled away, pressing herself against the cold ground, watching as they tore open trash bags for food. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she was too weak to fight. Every night, the cold seeped into her bones, making her tremble so violently it seemed as if her heart might stop at any moment. She searched for shelter, but even nature was merciless. Every time Luna found a place to rest, the cold and hunger reminded her she was alone. And yet, despite everything, Luna didn't give up. Somewhere deep inside, she believed there had to be another world, a place where she wouldn't be hit, chased, or yelled at. She didn't know what that world looked like, but her battered heart clung to the thought like the last ray of hope. Every night, as she closed her eyes, she dreamed of warmth, not of a person, not of a home, but simply of a place where she could feel safe, where she could sleep without fear, and wake up knowing pain would never come again. Luna walked through the deserted streets, dimly lit by flickering streetlights. Her paws throbbed with pain, the blood had dried, but every movement brought fresh cracks to her torn skin. Her head spun with weakness, and her stomach felt like it was tied in a painful knot. At dawn, as the bitter chill of the night began to fade, she spotted a dumpster outside a diner. Luna knew this might be her only chance, but she was afraid to get closer. The smell of food wafting from the dumpster was irresistible, but the sound of people's voices nearby made her tremble. She cautiously crept closer, holding her breath to stay undetected. But just as her nose touched a bag of leftover food, the door of the diner burst open. Luna jumped back, her body coiling like a spring. A man with an angry face stormed out, waving his arms. "Get out of here, stupid mutt!" Luna bolted, her tail tucked between her legs. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it would leap out of her chest. She didn't stop until she was several blocks away, hiding behind a concrete wall. Her breathing was ragged, and tears filled her eyes. Once again, she was left with nothing. Her strength was fading. Days and nights blurred into one endless stream of pain and hunger. Her paws barely obeyed her, but she kept moving forward, driven only by a faint glimmer of hope. One day, Luna came across a group of dogs. They were gathered around a bloodied piece of meat that someone had clearly thrown away. Luna froze, knowing that these dogs would likely see her as a threat. She slowly approached, letting out a soft whimper, trying to show she didn't want to fight. But one of the dogs, a large male with a torn ear, bared his teeth and growled. It was all the signal the pack needed. Luna tried to retreat, but it was too late. The dogs lunged at her. A surge of pain shot through her body as sharp teeth sank into her side. She fought back with everything she had, but her thin, weakened body was no match for the fury of the starving pack. She only managed to escape because the sound of an approaching car distracted the dogs. Luna, limping and bleeding, ran as fast as she could, putting as much distance as possible between herself and the danger. She didn't stop until she was alone, far from anyone or anything that could hurt her again. Luna ran despite the pain, despite her wounds. She didn't know where she was heading. Her instincts drove her, and the only thing keeping her alive was movement. Blood slowly oozed from the bite marks, staining the snow with dark patches. Her breathing was heavy and ragged, as if each breath was a final step toward the edge of a cliff. She stopped only when she could no longer move. Ahead stretched a frozen wasteland, bare trees, icy ground, and a faint light on the distant horizon. Luna collapsed onto the snow. The cold seeped into her battered body, but she couldn't even shiver anymore. At that moment, her entire past seemed to flash through her mind. The yelling, the blows, the chain. She remembered every moment of pain, every disappointment. The world had been cruel to her, and now she saw no reason to keep fighting. The wind howled above her, like a farewell song for a lonely soul. But suddenly, in the distance, she heard a sound. Faint but unmistakable. It was a voice. A human voice. "Hey! Are you okay?" Luna couldn't believe her ears. She tried to lift her head, but her strength was gone. A figure was approaching. It was a man, dressed in a warm jacket, holding a flashlight. He saw her and froze. "Oh my God," he whispered, kneeling down slowly next to her. Luna flinched weakly, instinctively trying to pull away. Her eyes were full of fear, but she didn't have the strength to run. She braced herself for a blow, for the yelling she'd always known. But instead, the man removed his scarf and gently draped it over her wounded body. "It's okay, girl. You're safe now." His voice was soft and soothing. Luna didn't understand the words, but she felt something in them, something different. The warmth of the scarf and the man's gentle tone began to melt the ice that had surrounded her heart. Carefully, he picked her up, even though she was heavy and injured. Luna let out a faint whimper as his hands brushed against the wound on her side. "I'm sorry, sweet girl," he said softly, "but I'm not leaving you here." The man carried her through the snow and cold. Each step he took was steady, but Luna still couldn't trust him. She felt the warmth of his body, but her heart, so used to cruelty, wouldn't let her relax. They arrived at an old but cozy house. The man opened the door, and warm light poured out, wrapping around them both. Luna flinched slightly, afraid of this unfamiliar world. Inside was a small kitchen, and the smell of something delicious lingered in the air. The man carefully placed her on a soft blanket near the fireplace. Luna stared at him with wide, wary eyes. Alert, but no longer panicked. He brought her water and a small piece of bread. Setting the bowl down in front of her, he sat nearby, making no sudden movements. "Eat, girl. This is for you." Luna looked at the food but couldn't bring herself to go near it. She didn't know if it was a trap or a real gift. The man didn't rush her. He just sat quietly, watching her. After a few minutes, Luna finally sniffed the bread and cautiously began to eat. Each bite was slow and deliberate as she kept a close eye on him. "Good girl," he said softly, Luna lay on a soft blanket by the fireplace, her body still trembling from exhaustion, but the warmth of the fire and the calm atmosphere allowed her to relax for the first time in a long while. The man sat nearby, watching her. He knew the dog had been through so much and wanted to help, but he also understood that kindness alone wouldn't erase her pain. After Luna finished eating, he stood up slowly and walked into another room. Luna lifted her head warily, watching his every move, but stayed where she was, too worn out to try and run again. In the next room, the man picked up his phone and dialed the number for the local animal shelter. "Hello. Is this the animal shelter?" he asked, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't startle the dog.
"Yes, it is," a woman's voice responded. "I've found a German Shepherd. She's badly injured and very weak. I was planning to bring her to you. Can you take her in?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then the woman replied with regret. "Unfortunately, we're completely full right now. We don't have space for another dog. Is there any chance you could foster her temporarily? We can add her to our waiting list, but it may take several weeks." The man glanced back at Luna, who was curled up near the fireplace, her sad eyes fixed on him. Her gaze seemed to ask, "Are you going to abandon me too?" He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision he had to make. "All right," he said, knowing he couldn't bring himself to leave her. "I'll take care of her." "Thank you so much," the woman said. "If you need help with food or medical care, please let us know. We'll do what we can to assist." He hung up the phone and returned to Luna. Sitting down on the floor beside her, he tried to meet her at eye level. "Well, girl," he said with a warm smile, "looks like you're staying here." Luna stared at him intently. She didn't understand his words, but there was something different about his tone, about the way he moved. He wasn't like the people who had hurt her before. The man gently ran his hand along her side, careful to avoid her wounds so he wouldn't cause her more pain. Luna flinched slightly but didn't pull away. It was the first touch she had felt that didn't carry a threat. "We've got a long road ahead," he said, looking into her eyes. "But I promise you'll never be alone again." That night, Luna slept for the first time not under the open sky, not in fear or pain, but in warmth. Her dreams were restless, full of memories of the past, but beside her was someone who had decided to give her a second chance. The next morning, the man took Luna to a veterinary clinic. They examined her, treated her wounds, gave her vaccinations, and outlined a recovery plan. The veterinarian, impressed by her resilience, remarked, "She's got a strong spirit. She's been through so much, but she's lucky you found her." The man nodded, looking down at Luna, who was now lying quietly on the floor, watching him closely. He bought her a new collar, a soft bed, and high-quality food. Every day he spent time with her, talking to her, feeding her by hand, and taking her on gentle walks. Slowly, Luna began to learn how to trust, though the fears of her past still lingered. One day, weeks later, Luna approached him as he sat on the couch and cautiously rested her head on his lap. It was her first true sign of trust. The man froze for a moment, feeling a warm wave of emotion rise in his chest. "You're a good girl," he said softly, stroking her head. "You're home now." And in that moment, Luna understood she no longer had to be afraid. Her new life was just beginning, and this man was ready to walk the path with her,